Hello again. So today I want to talk about Twitter. On March 19th, 2020, and the video is up on my YouTube channel, you can see the link up in the top right hand corner there. On March 20th, I spoke about Twitter and how I was using Twitter. I'd started to get into Twitter, I'd started to understand it, I'd started playing with it, and I'd started to make some successes with Twitter. So I made a video that I called How I'm Taking Twitter Seriously, and people seemed to like it, so I thought I'd do a follow-up on what I've changed since March. And by the way, March is only a month ago, and so much has changed in the way I look at Twitter in that last month. I've grown my Twitter by another 200 or another 250 followers or something like that, but I've seen a huge shift in engagement and the way that things are working and the way that I'm writing tweets and how I've approached it different. So I wanted to go over those again, but a little bit differently. I've called this Using Twitter Even More Seriously. I want to go over this again, how I write tweets, because this since January to April now, I've gone through kind of 4 stages with this. I started in February by using Hype Fury, which was a big game changer to how I wrote tweets. So when I first started writing tweets in January, I was writing tweets very differently. I was writing tweets like this. That video is cool as shit. No, I hadn't seen it. I wasn't writing tweets for any particular audience. I wasn't focusing on growing my Twitter. I didn't care whether I had followers or whether they left me or not. So as a result of that, I only tweeted 40 times in January and I had 15,000 impressions. And then moving to now, I've changed how I write my tweets much more. And this is something that I tweeted the other week, a couple of days ago now. And I think this perfectly sums up Twitter and all other social networks and all other marketing. You're competing with a waterfall. On any of these platforms, you are competing with a waterfall. There is a waterfall of content that is constantly coming down the stream. You are reading it, you're consuming it, but everybody else is consuming it too. So when they see your tweet in the middle of everybody else's tweets, your tweet needs to be the salmon that's swimming in the other direction. There needs to be something about it that looks different to everything else that's surrounding it. That might be the way that you write, that might be the messages that you say, that might be the ideas that you propose, that might be the structure of your tweets, that might be the fact that you use images more than anybody else. All these kind of things. It doesn't really matter which way you approach it, but when somebody's going like this through their Twitter timeline, they need to see one of your tweets and go and stop and start reading your tweet because they're really interested in it, and you want that to happen ideally with every single tweet. So you need to think about that first of all. And this is only something that I've worked out. As I said, I'm not an expert. This is only something that I've worked out in April after doing this for 4 months. And the other thing to mention about that is as well, I've been writing about 10 tweets a day since February. In fact, I've been writing way more than 10 tweets a day since February. And it's just the process, it's just the practice, it's just the doing over and over and over. Writing short messages gets you better at writing short messages. Writing tweets makes you better at writing tweets. So now, in April, 4 months later, or 3 months later, I've written hundreds of tweets, if not thousands, and suddenly I'm getting better at it. So there's no way to shortcut this necessarily. There's no way to shortcut the process that I'm sharing here, but this is what's worked for me. So we spoke about January, let's not go on about that anymore. And February is when I started to take my Twitter seriously. And you can see straight away, if you compare it from January to February, I tweeted 500 times and got 120,000 tweet impressions. It was immediately an improvement. I grew my Twitter following for the first time in a while. I only added 10 new Twitter followers, but I was happy with that because it showed that the things I was writing was beginning to resonate. But as you can see from these 2 tweets that I was writing, I was saying interesting stuff, and that's not a problem that I've ever really had because I enjoy writing, I enjoy sharing my ideas with people, and I like to think that I've actually got something worth saying. I've got a lot of experience across all kinds of different mediums, so what to say isn't really an issue for me, and actually writing it in a persuasive tone isn't really an issue. But these 2 tweets had good ideas under them, but I was still tweeting out into a void. They wasn't for any particular audience. At this point, I'd not decided what my audience was, who I was trying to appeal to, and you can kind of tell with these tweets that I'd not worked out who I was wanting to talk to, and I was just writing good tweets for the sake of it. The other thing as well is that these tweets were quite long, and they're wordy, and I've written them as if I'm telling a story, which is not necessarily a problem, but these tweets, if you saw them in a timeline and you're going like this, they look long and they look difficult to read, and there's no point to the second one, even though there's an idea underneath it. There's a million other ways I could have written this, and the idea's not really that obvious. The other tweet, like a ghostwriter tweet, that's got potential, but again, I'd not really uncovered the proper idea that I was trying to get at in these tweets. So you could see that I was starting to practice the craft. I was starting to learn how to write a good tweet, even though they were long and a little bit obtuse, but I'd not worked out my audience. And then when I moved on to March, again, in February, I tweeted 500 times. In March, I tweeted nearly 700 times, and I'd got 200,000 tweet impressions. So again, it was an improvement and things seemed to be going in the right direction. And now you can see a big difference between my tweets here. This is just a small example from March. I'd shortened my tweets down much, much more. I'd started to figure out my audience and the things that I'd wanted to say. And this linked in with my book. I'd started to realise that I think I got a few sales of my book in March, and I started to realise, yes, this is what I want to talk about, because I've written an entire book about it, about production and productivity and getting better and doing things every day, and I'd spent 13 years practicing this craft. So those are the things that I wanted to say, and I'd started to work that out in March, and as you can see now, I was thinking about those kind of topics. In these two tweets, I was talking about practicing, and I was talking about the process and how to think better and mindset and things like that. But there was still an element of tweeting out into the void with these tweets. I'd not fully realised my audience at this point. I think when I look at these tweets now, I can kind of see my lack of confidence in my ideas underneath it. There was still some refinement to do in both of those tweets. I could have written them much shorter and written them much better, but I was starting to get towards the nub of the idea that I wanted to get to. And then in April, well, I've just put up a selection of my tweets. Now you can see the kind of tweets that I want to write, and now you can see how I've figured out how to write Twitter better. You can straight away see there's much more confidence in the way that I'm writing tweets. A lot of my tweets are much shorter and much more punchy and talking directly to the user, and also with a lot of my tweets here as well. There's this thing that I've realised on Twitter, that it pays to be a little bit polarising but not too much to annoy anybody. So a tactic to achieve that kind of thing is generally not talking directly to somebody, generally not saying to somebody, you are fat. Not that I talk about fat people or anything, but just as an example. Don't say to somebody on Twitter, you are fat. But if you word it in a different way, where you say, the most of the population is fat, it hits a different audience, and people don't think that it's about them because it might not be about them. And for the people who it is about, they also enjoy the tweet because they might think that it's not about them. I've probably bumbled that entire explanation there. But I realise that it pays to not only be swimming up the waterfall in your style of tweet, but also swimming up the waterfall in your idea. It needs to be a little bit controversial, a little bit different to what everybody else is saying. And I've really started to kind of zone in on that idea in April, and it's started to really work for me. As you can see there, a lot of my tweets are starting to get more engagement, apart from the make yourself matter, make matter tweet, which I thought was brilliant, but nobody else agreed with. And you can see that I'm starting to work out the idea of how to tweet properly, and I've also been experimenting with the idea in the middle where it says new idea, new idea, new idea over and over. I've been experimenting with the idea of punctuation and using it to design tweets. Whenever I write a tweet like that, it nearly always gets more engagement or more likes instantly, because people presumably see it in their timeline. It looks different to all the rest of the tweets. They spot it and like it. So you can see a massive difference between those tweets. If we go back to January, I was saying nothing. And if you're tweeting like this right now, you won't ever increase your Twitter following. And then in February, I started to figure out the idea, but it still wasn't quite there because I'd not worked out my audience, and some of my tweets were just a little bit too wordy. And then in March, my tweets were getting shorter and more punchy, but the idea underneath them wasn't quite right, and I'd still not worked out my audience properly. And then in April, which is to now, where I've had 400,000 tweet impressions and 220 followers, I've really started to work out the audience that I'm targeting, the things that I'm saying, and my focus on Twitter is now 100% laser focused, and I only ever tweet about those things. Hope you enjoyed this video about Twitter. I'm probably going to return to Twitter again because I like showing you how I'm using Twitter, because hopefully it'll help you. I'm probably going to return to this topic again in another couple of months just to show you an update. And I'm making these videos every couple of days. I try to make them every day, but at the minute I'm recording and editing and designing a design course, so my time is taken up a lot by that in the evening, so I'm struggling to find time for this. But I'm trying to record these videos every day where possible, so hopefully I'll see you here again tomorrow for another video. And until then, I'll see you soon.